Hi, everybody, and very welcome to our daily Maverick webinar with John Sanei. I'm so happy to be with you, John, and forward to a chat on what does this post-COVID world mean for us. So I thought we might go back a little bit to your book, which is excellent and freely available. You can tell our audience about that.
Sure.
When you started seeing what was happening, you decided to make your way from where you live, Dubai, to South Africa, to your family home in Mahobas Kloof. How was the airport then? Because I've seen some pictures and it's terrifying.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I was actually sitting on the beach in Dubai and I was reading my phone and I was starting to see that many cities around the world were starting to close down. And I lived on the 20th floor of an apartment, a block in Dubai. And I thought to myself, do I want to be in an apartment in isolation if that arrives in Dubai? And at the beach, I decided to give notice for my apartment and change my flights and everything and put stuff in storage. And then the next day I got to the airport and I made a video about it that's been shared thousands of times.
Yes.
And the airport was empty. It was the most, I couldn't even see one person besides the person in the counter trying to check my bag in. And there was absolutely nobody in the airport in the sort of business class sort of checking in area. And it was a very eerie, almost as if, oh my God, this is starting to become a reality. And this was a few weeks ago before we were all under lockdown, you know?
Yes.
So it was a very scary and very realistic reality check that that happened to me when I arrived at that airport.
Because that place is like a meeting place of the world. It's very much a universal airport, migrant workers
Yes.
coming through, people landing. It must have been very strange. So what you say in your book is that this moment heralds for us a universal reset, as if we were getting messages, be it about climate change, about the nature of capitalism. What enables is a moment of universal reset. Tell me more about what you were thinking there.
Sure, with pleasure. Before I say that I was busy with my fourth book and I was about a third of the way through when COVID happened and my book all of a sudden became irrelevant because I don't think we can talk about the world ever again without taking COVID-19 into perspective. So what I decided to do was start writing new books with this concept of a universal reset in place, because you got to be living in a cave not to realize that we are experiencing an uncontrollable collapse of our everyday life and the world as we knew it. What happens now will change the way we do business, structure our societies, run our governments, the way we work, collaborate, spend, travel, and educate ourselves all at once. If you think about anything else that's happened in our lifetime, we'll see that maybe the 2008 crisis changed one or two things. 9/11 changed one or two things. Tsunami in Thailand changed one or two things. This is changing everything. So we've got to understand that this is a calamity like we've never seen before. And this is a painful process to let go of what we were used to, but a wonderful opportunity to start thinking about new things that we can do.
Interesting. So you see it as both catalytic and apocalyptic. And earlier when we spoke, you said it had, in fact, your comparator was even beyond the 1918 flu epidemic, the one that everyone's been writing about, that in fact we need to go back to the 14th century. Tell us more about that.
So I'm researching the next book in the series that I'm writing, and I kind of picked up on the fact that something similar happened in the 14th century when the Black Death devastated most of Europe. And because of that devastation, we started to see the acceleration of labor-saving technologies in agriculture. We started to see a wider dispersal of technical knowledge, and ultimately the breakdown of the feudal system, which was their capitalism at the time, and which led us to the birth of the Italian Renaissance, which was the incredible flowering of our knowledge and art and culture that we'd never seen before. And if we bring it to an African example, we know that often we burn the fields at the end of winter. And what are we doing? We are bringing it all down to nothing and watching new seeds grow and rebirth. And this is what we're experiencing right now, I believe, is a renaissance. But a renaissance always has a painful space. And this is what we are right now, in a painful space.
So I love that we'll get to where the hope lies. But let's just talk about some of what you write in the book is to acknowledge how we're feeling. And I think on all our webinars thus far, we're doing the big stuff, like out there. What does it mean? How does this virus look? How does it travel? What's my safety plan? But what you write is that how you were feeling before would be not enhanced, but that's how you'd feel
magnified.
now. So you magnified
Yeah.
Because right now everything's extreme. If you're sick before, you feel worse now. If you were holding on to anger, it'll be magnified by your isolation and uncertainty. If you were in a harmful relationship, it will feel inescapable. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, look, I think this has done is brought to the surface our own psychological issues that we were too busy to work with, as well as businesses that were on the teetering of failing. They failed. Relationships have failed. Our anxiousness, our depression, our anger, and our sickness has all been brought to the surface for us to deal with. And this is what's creating a lot of mental sickness. And it's not that it's creating mental sickness, it's just bringing up things that we haven't dealt with. And so in order for us to become adaptable, optimistic, and flexible about the future, we've been forced to go into a process of self-reflection. Because think about it, we are both physically isolated and emotionally isolated. And now this gives us an opportunity to dive deeper into our psyches. And it's very key that we pick up on the fact of whether we're being triggered on our survivor consciousness on a junior way or a mature way. And many of us are being triggered in a junior way. And the junior triangle of victimization, also called the drama triangle, has 3 characteristics in it. We can either feel sorry for ourselves, or we can feel sympathetic for people out there, which a lot of us fall into the trap of. We become the savior of the world. And then the third thing we do is become very angry. And so now if you're feeling sorry for people out there, remember that just you feeling sorry for them doesn't make them better. You're just giving yourself a pass to feel sorry for yourself and for others. And if you think about Oprah, for example, she doesn't feel sorry for women. She empowers women. It's a very different energy. And then the third triangle is anger, but we should change those characteristics and become aware of them, that instead of being a victim, we can become a creator. And instead of being a savior, we can become a coach. And instead of being angry, we can become a challenger. And we can change our characteristics in order to be able to see this as an opportunity for us rather than happening to us.
So this is a seminar brought to us by APSA, and it's to assist small businesses who may be struggling. So recent research from Papama and just about everybody is telling us that 70% of our small businesses may not make it through this fire. And I'm sure there are many of them on the line today. Hello, Miguel. Hello, Maeve. Hello, Arena. Tijal, I'm seeing you all here. Looking forward to your questions with John. So, John, what kind of mindset might those businesses be able to accelerate into to help them through unprecedented times?
Well, look, I think it's obviously a difficult situation and it's an extraordinary time. And so what I'm going to say next might be a little bit harsh, but I want you to just take it from where it comes from.
Sure.
I use this point in my book. I call it burn your ships. In other words, what you were doing before this pandemic is kind of irrelevant, because when we come out of this pandemic, consumers will want to be serviced differently. They'll need and prioritize different products and services. The way you need to go about looking at servicing them has to fundamentally change, because we have fundamentally changed. And this concept of burn your ships comes from many stories of generals arriving to battle with people or a country, and they realize that they're outnumbered. And because they're outnumbered, they tell their soldiers to burn their ships so that they have no choice but to fight and move forward. Now, it could be a controversial point, but ultimately, if you do burn your ships and redesign your business based on a decentralized format, a more adaptable business model, and when we do go back to normal, guess what? You've won, because now you've got a new way, a new version, a new income stream. So my suggestion is catalyze yourself to design a new type of business for the new type of consumer that's coming out, and then wait and see what happens around us as we start coming out of this.
In your experience, and you've coached CEOs, you've spoken all over the world, how easy is it to burn your ships? I mean, to forget everything that's familiar, to consider a completely new way of doing business, of working?
It's exceptionally hard. And that's what this is. It's an exceptionally difficult time that we're in. The luxury of giving ourselves the time to do this is here and upon us. But remember, the businesses that are going to come out of this and are going to be successful and thrive are the ones that were most adaptable, most flexible, most decentralized. And so, yes, of course, it's difficult, but letting go of our pasts and letting go of things that we thought were successful in the past obviously is a difficult process, but we don't find ourselves in an easy process. But I want us to think about it similar to this. When we were in the agricultural times, hundreds of years ago, the people that were highly skilled in agriculture really found themselves in no man's land when the Industrial Revolution arrived, because your agricultural skills were irrelevant, because you had to be good in production and efficiency, and you had to retrain yourself into becoming an accountant or a lawyer or something like that. But remember, we're just moving between the Industrial Revolution now to this new quantum world where the rules have changed, and we have to go through a process of unlearning to relearn. I think it was Alan Watts who said, the knowledgeable man has to learn something new every day, but the wise man has to unlearn something new every day. So is it easy? No. Is it imperative? Yes. And this is what we have to do.
So questions are welcome. Anybody who's on here, we look forward to them. Tell me about your business, John, and how that's been impacted. We suddenly are doing a lot of Zooming and working on all sorts of platforms we hadn't before. So how have you had to burn your ships?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I had no choice. I was sitting in Amsterdam. I just got out of a conference for Gartner. It was a fantastic conference, and I was loving it, and all the engagement from all the CIOs from around the world. And I got into the reception of my hotel, and I got 3 emails that canceled pretty much 12 to 20 talks that I had for the future few months. And it was such a hit to my gut. You know, I went from making a lot of money to absolutely making none. Like zero. I mean, it really got cut. I mean, I was speaking to somebody the other day that were complaining that their salary got cut by 30%. I said, oh, that's lucky. I went to zero salary and I had to reinvent. So I've spent the last sort of month rethinking, how do I go about changing what I teach, which is, look, I've just written a book. What value do I give of the world? How do I restructure my pricing? Who are my new clients? And how do I go about giving them the message that they need? And because of this rebirth of my thinking and my energy, I'm now on Daily Maverick and I'm being interviewed all over the place. Why? Because I've been able to recatalyze myself, not getting rid of my skill set. And this is not, we must become clear. It's not about getting rid of your skill set. It's about getting rid of your business model. And that business model that we were carrying on was an age-old business model called supply and demand. That's dead. It's dying. It's over. We need to move towards a different, more modern business model, which I'm calling curate, match, and facilitate. How do you curate what your customers want? How do you match it to them in a personal way? And how do you facilitate it for as easily and cheaply as possible? The example I can give you that somebody who's done this is Spotify. Spotify, the music app, is an incredible app. Why? It curates music for you, it matches it to you, and it delivers it to you for $5 a month. You can have an endless amount of music. And so we got to rethink our business models, and this is the real difficult part.
You say here, and then I'll come to questions. Thanks for the great questions. Well, for business and people alike, we can use the lessons we're learning now to prepare for a future that's digital. In fact, this virus may be the biggest single stimulus for digital transformation in our history. It's clear you've put yourself almost entirely online. So let me get to some questions here. From Roshni Gajar, what does the most appropriate day one of a post-lockdown look and feel like? Where does this leave the gig economy in an environment where big businesses have their employees as their number one priority?
I lost you halfway through that question. I'm so sorry. Just say that again.
So,
what does day Roshni, one look like? Yeah.
For people in the gig economy, also I guess for small and medium-sized businesses, especially when big businesses are prioritizing their employees and trying to see what they can do for themselves.
Yes. Look, the day one looks like any way you want it to look. If you're holding on to the way you used to do things, it's going to be a horrible and dark place for you. If you're adding new value, you're looking at ways of coming at your clients in a different way, servicing them in a different way, adding value in a different way. Day one looks very bright and cheerful for you. So I was telling you offline, I haven't invoiced anybody for over a month. Yesterday was our first invoice that went out. Now, look, my day one has already begun. Thank you. But my day one began yesterday. it's not about day one then, it's about day one now. What new value you're adding so that you can recreate. So if you're waiting and worried, then you're not creating. You are stuck in the junior consciousness triangle. And what I'm saying through this book, and every part of this book I've practiced, by the way, it's not just theory, it's this: if you're stuck in that waiting, hoping, thinking that it's going to be like it was, you're stuck. You're not creating. You're stuck in poor me.
So a question from Jolene Fisser. It's easy for those of us with an education who I guess live in this this world of webinars and Zoom to embrace this change, approach it with a positive attitude. What about most of our compatriots and brethren who are in extreme poverty and who find themselves in even worse circumstances than before? So can we talk about whether you see solidarity, bridging, that I think we've seen in great measure as a future culture, which hasn't really been a macro culture for us?
Look, I think that question always comes up for me.
Yes.
And don't want to take anything away from the people that are taking incredible strain out there. And I sob sometimes myself because I'm going through the 5 stages of mourning, and one of them is grieving, because I'm grieving for the pain that other people are having and people that are losing their loved ones without being able to be on their side. But let's just recap on 2 very clear things.
Yes, sure.
Today, most people can get access to the internet. Most people can. It's much cheaper than it ever used to be. There's more cell phones in the world than there's ever used to be. And so we've also got to look at the opportunity that is out there for people to be able to expand their knowledge through informal learning. And so for me, it's like, yes, we can be sympathetic to them, but that doesn't help. What we can do more than anything else is tap into our own new skill sets and try and empower as many of those people out there as possible. I'm doing free webinars for schools and townships, in schools in those areas, as much as I can, because if I was sitting feeling sorry for them, what does that help? It doesn't help anything. I have to empower myself in order to empower them. So yes, they are going to be taking strain, but what's the best thing you could do is become the best version of yourself, add new value, and go out there and help them, because they need help, and it's up to us to help them.
From David Duplessis, a great question. If one of our big changes is going to be how we think about climate change, how we think about our role in it, how we think about our role in protecting our planet, doesn't it change traditional conference diplomacy? If we should be slowing our contribution to climate change, we have to change this diplomatic practice, or how it is that we usually gather and share.
Look, a fantastic question. And I think that we're starting to see a big move from consumer centricity to planet centricity. And we've got to realize that for the last 30 years, consumer was king. We would go to the cheapest markets, destroy people's lives, make them work for nothing. Why? Because we all wanted the cheapest t-shirts, the cheapest cup of coffee, the cheapest car. That's got to change. We need to become consumer activists now and drive towards the fairest, not the cheapest. So to deny buying clothes from the places that give us it to the cheapest, but look for places that are creating a conscious sort of supply chain. So yes, every touch point of our lives, I believe, should be prioritized around planet centricity. Now, there's 3 things that need to happen for planet centricity to happen. 1, consumers need to become consumer activists. Organizations need to restructure themselves, that they're not going for efficiency and profitability, but actually upliftment of communities. Because if that was the case, no corporate would now ship off their manufacturing to China, because if the priority was a community and employee, that wouldn't happen. And thirdly, we need governmental structures and new institutions put in place to govern this. We're starting to see this in Germany in a massive way, and in many parts of Europe, where we're starting to see all 3 of these starting to come into play. And so we are on the verge of this, and the catalyst of this, I believe, will give us that opportunity.
I guess it means less traveling. From Jonathan Everest, what industries or business opportunities do you see going forward? Today I was reading telemedicine, logistics, homeschooling, also quite a few questions about what you see as the future of education now that we look at perhaps you losing a whole school year.
Well, look, I mean, I think all of those questions are great. But again, I want to bracket down and saying it's not about sectors and it's not about businesses. For me, it's about how well do you understand what the new nuances of what consumers want. And what consumers want across the board is hyper efficiency and seamlessness, hyper personalization, and something at a fair price. And if you're able to design any business around those three things, you're going to have super fans. If you don't design it around those things and you're prioritizing other things, it's not going to happen. So any sector, may it be food, or may it be transportation, or may it be education, can you make it more seamless, more personalized, and at the best price possible, so it's hyper trusted and hyper transparent? So of course, education is going to be changing, and thank God it is, because it's been high time that we've been stuck in educating people for the industrial revolution while we're moving into the quantum phase. So what I believe what's going to happen with education is that we're going to become much more personalized in understanding how students actually learn, because we all learn in different ways, and also being taught the things that we are naturally good at, rather than being forced to do things that we're not actually good at, because not everybody is good at STEM. I was terrible at STEM, science, mathematics, and those sort of things. I was useless at it. But doesn't mean I was a stupid student, but at school I was stupid, but not because I'm stupid, it's because I didn't fit into that curriculum. So I think we'll start seeing hyper-personalization in education, utilizing AI, understanding the human need states in the way we study. And this is going to be a wonderful place for us to change education, prepare us for the future, and then change the constructs of also how we get educated. Because I think we'll have private tuition with us, people, and AI, but then we'll have cultural sort of spaces where kids can go and learn and be with each other as well. So I think there'll be a breakdown of the whole structure of going to school, because remember, school was also built on the Industrial Revolution and how the factories used to look. So as that breaks down, we also need to break down the structures and stories and narratives of what education should be.
So school could be some of it delivered at home, but actually you're getting this global education because suddenly you have much more, but then there will be some gatherings where young people can go to.
Well, I think that there will be social constructs that will be built where kids can go and spend 2-3 hours with each other and just do socializing, because I think that's really still very important. But the education system where 30 kids or 40 or 50 kids are sitting in one classroom with one teacher, that's done. And thank God it's done, because I don't learn like Jimmy and I don't learn like you. And I also want to learn different things. And so that all needs to change. And like I said earlier, anything that you can do that can be more personalized to us, the better for us, and the more we want to seek those things out.
From Karen Mako Matanda, a nice question. What are some of the business that we can look at who've burnt the bush, burnt their ships, and they're coping well with COVID-19? Is it too early to say?
Look,
have you seen a few?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I'll give you one example. Because I was in Dubai, I saw this happening right in front of my eyes. I've got a very good friend that owns 2 fitness studios. They've won best luxury fitness experience in Dubai 2 years in a row. And so obviously his business was about people coming to do workouts.
Yes.
And the minute he started to see the shutdowns happen, he changed his business model to rental of equipment and buying classes online. So all of a sudden, he started making cash flow immediately. As his gyms closed, he had transport people deliver bikes, spinning bikes, weights, TRX. I mean, the whole gym just got rented out. And he started making income straight away. And he immediately put all his fitness instructors on in front of a Zoom. He bought them studio lights inside their apartments in Dubai and immediately changed everything towards becoming an online business. So he burnt his ships. And in fact, he was joking with me the other day. He says, he said, I think I might even make more money now because he doesn't have his rent. And so he's like, I think this actually might even be a better business model, So yes, there's many of these stories.
That's great. Do you think that the office as we know it is going to change substantially? Do you think many business owners, small ones, medium-sized ones, big ones, are looking at how actually this is working quite well, and maybe I don't need to sit with that huge infrastructure cost?
Well, I think, one of the worst businesses I think you could be in right now is office space. Because I think everybody is questioning it now, because it's like, look, the first few weeks were rocky because we didn't understand how to have decentralized teams or hybrid teams. We weren't able to check on people. So once that settles, we'll start to realize, and the longer this goes on for, the more our habits will start becoming much more in sync with doing work in this new way. And like you said earlier, one of the points in my book is this is the #1 catalyst for digital transformation. Most businesses were doing digital transformation for the ticking the box, but now you're forced into it. So office space is definitely one of the things that will be challenged in a massive way. And I think that people might not totally abandon offices, but utilize them for very, very different reasons, and also maybe only visit them maybe once or twice a week. But definitely the concept of having a huge overhead and huge legacy costs in offices, I think those are over. Look, I haven't worked from an office for many years. Yes. I have a decentralized team of 11 people around me and my brand, and they live all over the world. And they work in coffee shops and they work at home. So I've been practicing this decentralized business model for a while now. And these are the businesses that will survive. The businesses that had those legacy costs, unfortunately, won't, unless they got deep pockets of cash flow, which I don't think many people do.
So your buddy in Dubai, he could so quickly change his business like that because the broadband fiber internet access is great there. When I've been, I've realized that. Yeah. So what do you think the role of government is in South Africa? This is from Kim Crashaw, on ensuring that all of us, all South Africans, don't get left behind, that we all need access to cheap, fast, reliable data. In fact, a few people have said they're leaving our seminar because they can't hear properly. Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I think that's their lines though, huh?
Oh, okay. Look, if we just talk about what our government's doing right now, and I think the rest of South Africa will agree that we have a fantastic president, and we're so happy that we have this president and not another president from another country that I won't name any names. But the truth is that we already have somebody who's a business person, who's into empowering people. He put together that committee that was challenging Vodacoms and MTNs of the world. And I think that democratization of information, the democratization of digitization is very high on his priority. And I don't think it's something that he's not focused on at all. I think he's highly focused on it. But also remember, we mustn't forget that it was just 5 years or 6 years ago when Vodacom was charging us 3 Rand a minute. And it was then 2 Rand a minute and then 1 Rand a minute. And now they can't even sell voice. And now it's all free because now it's on data. So we are evolving. And with the concept or the sort of drive from the Elon Musks of the world, and about 30 or 40 companies right now that are putting satellites, drones, and balloons into our atmosphere, driving towards totally bringing the cost of data to zero. So we are in a much better place we were before. We are going to be in a much better place. And I think the role of government with our president right now, he's not taking that as a slow process. I think he is driving it.
What's really struck me is that, in my view, is that our government has been quite slow until now. 15 years on many key projects. Why is it we're only getting water to communities which need them now? But the COVID-19 impact here has been to give us a government that I think we've all been wanting for a long time. It's fast, it's accountable, it's listening. Yes, there is police and soldier violence, but in many areas it's been a better government than one we've been used to. But a question from Tandi Davies: how do we collectively change our behavior out of lockdown so we don't slip into the previous ways of selfish consumption and travel and basically pursuing our own desires?
Great question. I love that question. And I want to just tap back onto your previous thing. I don't think it was a governmental issue, it was a presidential issue. And I think our new president has just needed this as a catalyst to show his leadership qualities. I think he's very calm and divisive in the way he makes decisions. And this has just brought it to the front, So I've got huge confidence in him and what he's doing. As far as this question is concerned, I think this question is a great question. But I think ultimately what you've got to realize is that when you're sitting in traffic and complaining about traffic, you are the traffic and you are society. And the best thing you can do is change you. And that's it. Just change you. Because if you continue like society, guess what? You are the traffic. And so for me, I made a very clear decision that I want to live a minimalist life about 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And, I live out of 2 suitcases. I live as a nomad. I live around the world. Well, I was in Dubai and basing myself there, but I had to make an emotional and conscious decision that I want to prioritize planet centricity and prioritize minimalism over stuff. And if we realize that stuff is all about this recognition that we need from around the world, and when we start to move ourselves from a junior consciousness to a mature consciousness, stuff just becomes stuff. So we also need to shift that within ourselves and then help society be inspired by that.
In your book, which many people, by the way, have said thank you for, because you've given it to us for free. Thank you. It's really a great and an easy read. I hope more people read it.
Thank you.
You say that you've moved from a to-do list to a to-be list, I think. Could you just explain that a little more? I found it quite good. Eh?
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Instrumentalist. Yeah?
No. So that point is called living an exponential life. And what I mean by that is most of us can describe our next holiday, well, when we used to have holidays, but we can describe our next holiday in more detail that we can describe the world we actually want to live in. So imagine you were going to Durban on holiday, you would know what flight to catch, what hotel you were staying in, what you needed to wear. I mean, you had all of that packed and ready to go. But if I ask people, what is the world that you want to live in and who do you want to be in the future? Most people will say, oh, I haven't really thought about that. But then if you haven't really thought about it, how do you ever arrive? And so for me, the best place to start is to get rid of your to-do list and get busy with a to-be list. Who do you want to be? What sort of world do you want to live in? What sort of society do you want to have? If you have a job, what sort of boss do you want to have? What sort of body do you want to have? And so the to-be list gives us the opportunity to be disciplined rather than needing motivation. And there's a big difference, because if you've decided on your to-be list and you've become clear that you, for example, want to be fit. So what will happen is that once you've made that to-be list and you revisit that to-be list often, before your alarm clock goes off at 5 o'clock, you're up at 4:55. Why? Because you've made a to-be list. And when you have clarity on that, it becomes easy to drive towards that. Now, there's a great side product of this, because a lot of people say to me, but how do I get rid of bad habits, John? And the answer is you don't get rid of bad habits. You become so focused on the new habits that you want to have, the bad habits fall away naturally because they're not part of your to-be list. So stop waiting. Stop thinking of your life in a linear way. Start with the end in mind and then work backwards, just like you do your holidays.
That's great. Quite a couple of similar questions. What if we can't be digital businesses? What if we need to be somewhere we are manufacturers? So from Stephen Lewis, how do manufacturers of goods that are labor intensive and they cannot reinvent like your friend did in Dubai so quickly, how do they get kick-started when this lockdown is over? Another question from somebody running a non-profit. How do we get into the value chain? A couple of, if you could just think through some of those for our audience, please.
Look, I think I don't know the specifics of those businesses, so it'd be remiss of me to give any advice. What I can say is that some businesses will fail. That is the sad truth of where we're at. Some businesses have to reinvent themselves. So if you were labor intensive, maybe that's not what you need to be doing moving forward. And that's the whole point of burning your ships. Because if you are waiting for it to come back, then that's great. But why don't you take a bit of time to rethink how it could be different and how you could do something different? And I know this is harsh. I understand that this is a difficult pill to swallow. But you know what? I've got a restaurant and in Cape Town. And guess what? It's closed and I can't even reopen it. And I've lost so much money at that restaurant. But I don't have a choice. What do I need to do about it? I need to rethink of new ways to make money. And so in that restaurant, we're now toying with the idea of ghost kitchens. And you know what ghost kitchens are? It's this new concept that's come out of America where you have a kitchen inside a warehouse and you just utilize Uber Eats or Order In to be able to deliver your meals for you. What you're doing there is you're keeping your costs down and you're just utilizing service sort of delivery chains. So every business has to be rethought. And so even me, I've lost so much money in that restaurant, I can't be waiting for it to go back. I've now had to rethink of how we could open up in a different format that's more decentralized and more adaptive.
Thank you. From Glenn Ross, this is something we spoke about a little bit when we were waiting. What do you think COVID-19 will do to public-private cooperation? It's improved significantly in the COVID response in South Africa.
Sorry, I lost you again there. My apologies. Just say that again.
Sorry, public-private cooperation. So we've seen links built between our government, the business sector, the civil society sector, in a way that's been quick and meaningful. Things we've been trying for 10 years have suddenly happened more quickly. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I love that question. And look, I'm busy writing the next book called FutureNOW with Iraj Abadian, a very well-known economist. And what we're trying to do in that book is trying to design a new society that prioritizes cooperation over competition. It's really time for us to rethink of the economic system. And so this has been a catalyst. Just like you said, we've been trying to do something for 10 years. This has all of a sudden brought it to the forefront. And so do I think it's great? Absolutely. Are we seeing hyper collaboration around the world? Absolutely. But what's most important is that we as individuals start to see how we can add value and not wait for government, wait for business. How can you become more collaborative? And look, me giving out my free book is me trying to be more collaborative, is me trying to uplift people around me so that we can all now join this collective of building something new. So yes, have we seen hyper collaboration between Google and Apple for the very first time? Yes, they're now tracking all our health to be able to create a system where we can predetermine any of these things sort of coming. But ultimately, we as human beings need to take responsibility for how we are coming at this, and us becoming more collaborative, and us paying our staff a bit more money because we want to uplift people rather than trying to always be the cheapest, always driving for competition, and replace that with a more mature, collaborative energy.
Quite a few questions here from non-profits who I guess must be really panicked as funding taps get closed off. How might they think of responding, reinventing, keeping going in a post-COVID world?
Social entrepreneurship. Businesses that are, so businesses that have got one or two reasons for being alive. One, to have a social just cause, and two, to be profitable in order to sustain the just cause. I think the concept of charity and non-profit has a fantastic intent, but the business model, it's non-existent. And so every time you have to go back to try and beg for more money and ask for more money, you're just stuck in a loop that is just not something that's sustainable. And one of the fastest growing sectors of business is social entrepreneurship, is to be an entrepreneur with a just cause, is to be conscious in your capitalism format. And so it's not about just thinking about capitalism as something that's terrible because it's done a lot of good, but it's about reformatting it into that non-profit section and say, look, how do we go for profit? How do we add real value while sustaining our business and helping people? And I think that a lot of people around the world are creating really successful, empowering systems and machines in order to be able to sustain it. And I think the biggest problem is that nonprofits are unsustainable. And so we have to rethink again the very concept of what are we trying to do and how are we trying to do it. And I spoke about this earlier around business models. It's like we have to rethink the business models at the moment. And I've written quite extensively in my other books, so that's a big part of this.
Good. So lots of questions here on what are the skills I need for this new world. Could you speak about that in the book? Again, I'll just speak quickly. You say to develop into our most authentic, unique selves, we need to understand what we're curious about, because what makes you excited and screams for your attention is what will set you apart. So curiosity, mindset, and skills that you're thinking of.
So before I answer the question, let me just step back a bit and say, look, the world we come from, the Industrial Revolution, was all about efficiency and production. And in order for us to be successful in that world, we needed to play a role in the production and efficiency chain. And what did we do? We went to school that looked like an Industrial Revolution factory. Then we went to university to study the courses given to us that were there to make us better as part of the production and efficiency machine. You became an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, all of them fantastic jobs and fantastic careers. But unfortunately, what's happened is that there's a surplus of all of them. I mean, how many good accountants do you know? And how many good lawyers do you know? And how many good engineers do you know? In fact, we have a surplus of all of these careers and all of these clever people. So what I believe, as we end the Industrial Revolution and come into a new world, which I'm calling the hyperdynamic quantum world, what we need to realize is that what will be celebrated is uniqueness. What will be celebrated is your authentic skill set that nobody else can do. And when you are able to bring about that authenticity and that uniqueness through your curiosity, all you have to do is tap into 0.001% of the people on the internet, charge them $1 a month, and you can live a very, very comfortable life. And so really, for me, it's about moving away from always thinking about our future in a logical way and start thinking about ourselves in a curious way. And the best example I can give you is me, because I'm highly fascinated with human psychology, futurism, quantum science, and business strategy. And guess who else combines those four topics? Nobody. I'm the only one. And so what happens now is I get asked to go speak around the world based on these four topics because I've become curious about them. So try and figure out what makes you most excited and then train yourself in that skill. It's not about following the skill. It's about figuring out what your highest excitement is and then following that as the rudder of what you should be training yourself in.
Anybody else, by way of example, that we could look at who has done this successfully?
Well, look, I think one of the best examples we can take a look at is, have you ever watched that show called Chef's Table on Netflix? They track the top 50 chefs in the world, and every chef has pretty much the same story. They went to a restaurant in France, they learned how to cook for 17 years, and then they went back to try and open up a restaurant that was similar to the one they learned in. It failed, they went bankrupt, they got cancer, they went through a divorce, and then they had to figure out what their unique flavoring was. And when they came back with that unique combination of flavors, boom, into the top 50 chefs of the world. So it's across the board. Anybody that you see is impassioned about what they do, that's got endless levels of creativity. Elon Musk is incredibly curious about what he's doing. And you know what? He might be the worst businessman in the world because business is not even on he doesn't care about that. All he wants to do is bring about his curiosity and fascination with uplifting people. So that's very much my mission. And you'll realize when you tap into that energy, it's endless. You don't have to be protective of it. You can just collaborate quite naturally.
From Anthea Garman, who asks, she says, sustainability is an interesting word, but sometimes and often it purely means what's sustainable within a free market economy, rather than a larger, more imaginative economy that puts people's welfare at the center.
Yes.
Do you agree with this? Do you think that we might birth such a system?
Well, I love it. Great question. This is exactly what FutureNOW is about, my next book. It's about for us to move away from shareholder focus to stakeholder focus, because we've realized that the disparity in income between the very wealthy and the very poor is just not sustainable. And so what we have to do is rewrite the rules. And we are starting to see some very, very powerful people around the world start to relook at the rules. One of them is Jamie Dimon, the CEO and chairman of Chase Bank in America. He got 180 CEOs around, and they're starting to redesign the rules of the economic system of prioritizing shareholders to change it from prioritizing shareholders to stakeholders. And stakeholders are made up of employees, communities, shareholders, and consumers. And what that does, it creates sustainable, long-term, kind and elegant business models. And I think this is exactly what we should be focusing on and bringing about after this COVID-19.
I have a couple more questions here, John, if I may. So Chris Hubert says, great, but not everybody can be an entrepreneur. In a country like ours, we have to make jobs. And does renewable energy offer such a sector, a new sector? And this seems to be something we have to do. Have you thought about that? Sitting in Mahobas Kloof, Limpopo, often not a lot of connection there. Huh?
Look, I agree. Not everybody is an entrepreneur, but we also have in this country something called the necessity entrepreneur, somebody who is forced to become an entrepreneur because of the situation we find ourselves in. And if you're that keen to create more jobs, become more entrepreneurship, because the more entrepreneurs we have, the more jobs we can create. So yes, we're not all designed to be entrepreneurs, but sometimes out of necessity, we need to be able to create a new solution. Does that sort of energy, is it a good business model? Absolutely it is. Do I think it's a bit early? I do think it's a bit early. I think we haven't reached that tipping point with it. And I think that anybody that is in that world realizes that there's a bit of a lag with the adoption of it. But again, remember, we need consumer activism, business prioritization, a redesign of prioritization, and government institutions to change the way they do things. And I think we're on a good wicket right now with that happening. And this as being a reset that can be fast tracked, just like we're seeing anything digital being fast tracked. So yes, not everybody is an entrepreneur, but unfortunately, the situation we're in, we need to also all step up and try and do new things.
So today, the big debate, and as we sit here now, there's a cabinet briefing that will decide which parts of the economy go into a lockdown light or whether we maintain the hard lockdown in South Africa. In the book which you and Iraj are bringing, Iraj Abedian, the well-known economist, bringing out next week, how do you tackle this balance between flattening the curve of COVID-19 and ensuring that our economy at least begins to restart, because all the numbers are pretty shocking, huh?
Well, I mean, look, that is the bazillion-dollar question. I mean, sure. I don't think anybody has the answer yet. What I do think is that we need to prioritize lives. And I think, you can have an economy as strong as you want, as weak as you want. If people are dying, like, what's the point of that? And so we have to be reimagining what we do and how we go about it. To be honest with you, I have no answer for that. I think the prioritization of an economy over people's health is an issue, but then also I'm not somebody who's living on the breadline. So we need to think about it and workshop it. And I think the president is having an incredibly tough time trying to figure out what that answer is. I do trust that he's going to try something and then see how it works and then experiment with it and try and see and go back and forth until the whole world tries to figure out what we need to do and how we need to go about doing it. But ultimately, I think the biggest question that we're all waiting for all leaders to give us an answer to is, when do we open, how do we open, and when it needs to happen. But we've seen the resurgence of it come in South Korea. Sure. We've seen a resurgence of it in Sweden. So it's a touch and go scenario. So thanks for the question, but my God, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to answer that.
But also, if you look at China, at Singapore, second, third wave infections. Yes. So what they've done is they keep lockdown, then you de-restrict and you restrict again. So it's really the virus determining the curve of what happens with your lockdowns and therefore your economies. It's kind of unnoble times. So from Jalal Ghiazi Razavi, you've written a book with Iraj. What is it called?
I know Jalal. Hey, Jalal, how's it, man? It's called FutureNOW, and we're in the process of writing it right now. So it's coming out next week. It's about the new collective reality we can all work towards. And, it's about building out some audacious new rules for economics in order for us to be able to practice and build a sort of anchor point in people's psyche of another option. Remember, the economic system we're in right now, the society we live in right now, is all based on stories and narratives that have been handed down through generations. And these stories and narratives have become fact. And they've gone from whispers of folklore to that's just the way we've always done it. And I think this is the thing we need to be breaking, is that stories and folklore are just that. And if we can build a new narrative on economics, nobody better than Iraj to help me redefine that. So I'm really looking forward to that coming forward.
We're looking forward to that one. Lovely questions, two of them. Nikisha Goli, how is COVID-19 going to impact organizational culture and the efficiencies of staff? I've thought about that a lot. And then from Rian DeLange, if I can just scroll down a little, John, bear with me, is worldwide, we sit with so many people who have a victim mentality. How can this be addressed? I believe a solution to this will transform the world.
Okay, so the first question is hybrid teams, this new concept of being online and offline, which I think will be the future. I think right now we're all high tech and no touch. I think there will be a resurgence of us wanting to socialize again once everything is settled, because we miss human interaction. But as far as organizational cultures are concerned, look, the ones that had the strict check-in and check-out and that sort of ideology are by the wayside. We need to now be engaging with people that are self-motivated, self-inspired to be able to bring about the result that their organization requires. Will there be some people losing their jobs and businesses closing? Yes. Is it a time for us to develop new rules for hybrid teams? Absolutely. So there are new books being written right now about these hybrid teams, and you need to take a look at them. One of them is called Lockdown Leadership by a guy called Eric Kruger. So you can take a look at that. It's a handbook of how to build hybrid teams in the new culture of today. The second question about victimization. Yes,
the victim mentality.
Yes, the world, the thing about victimization is that it's such a subtlety. It's a subtlety when we feel sorry for ourselves. It's a subtlety when we be angry with things around us. It's a subtlety when we feel sympathetic around other people. And it becomes part and parcel of our own perspective. And what happens then is birds of a feather stick together. And then all you do is you have friends that are in the exact same boat as you that moan and shame and don't take responsibility for reality and make it the government's fault, everybody's fault except their own. And so the best answer I can give you is you yourself. Take the responsibility to not be a victim. And in that space, what you do is you inspire people around you, you build a new community around you, and you drive and focus towards where you want to go rather than where you want to be, or where you used to be. So ultimately, this is an individual decision and responsibility we need to take. It's not about the culture, the company, the government. It's about you and me, and we need to shift that.
From Selena Hartley, a couple just to close, a sector specific. How can a lawyer implement the model you're speaking about?
Well, look, I actually had this conversation with a lawyer the other day, and I know that in America, they're starting to have online court cases. So they're having pretty much the same sort of thing, one lawyer arguing, another lawyer arguing, and the judge sitting there discussing these things. So I think lawyers are easy because, okay, I don't want to say easy. They are simpler than, let's say, a hairdresser. I mean, what does a hairdresser do? I mean, the hairdresser's really got no option. But a lawyer can obviously still advise online, like I am with my clients, and still give advice and do contracts and still send them digitally. It's really about building your online persona, building that online influence by sharing thought leadership pieces, making vlogs, adding value to your community, building trust with a brand new market, and then allowing those to become your clients. And then how do you charge them also has to change. What service you give them also has to change, just like it has with me. And I was speaking to a hairdresser the other day, if we just want to talk about that quickly, because I had the same question from a hairdresser. And I said to the hairdresser, maybe it's time for you to help people look beautiful on their own, rather than having you as helping them. And how do you do that? Online. Do webinars, do coaching sessions, make YouTube videos, do whatever you need to do, but transfer your skill sets online, and then you can reestablish and rethink what you do.
From Gina Shukla and somebody else, what about the role of artists and storytellers? Have you thought what becomes of the arts? Suddenly, I'm able to go and look at museums that I wouldn't have been able to in the world. But locally, have you thought about what is the role of our storytellers and of our artists in this new scary world that we sit in?
Well, look, I'm a storyteller. And that's what I do. I tell stories to try and inspire people. Again, I think it's about redesigning how you come across. Quite specifically, I don't know because I haven't actually had that question before. I need a bit of time to think about it. But art now can be utilized in very many different ways. If you've got an Instagram page, you could have followers, you could sell advertising, you could have a YouTube page and build up your numbers there. There's many different ways to think about taking your linear brick and mortar business and putting it online in a different guise. And what I suggest is Google online artists, online storytellers, and watch what they've done, because there's a lot of people that are doing some incredible things out there, and use them as your North Star to start redesigning how you bring your service and your skill set to the world.
What I was thinking of also was Arundhati Roy's essay, which has been so shared. She wrote it in the Financial Times, but they made it free. And she spoke about this being an opportunity for recreation. It's the most beautiful essay, and also Ben Okri. So our big thinkers and our storytellers, Gina, are really guiding us, I feel, quite well at this moment. Beulah Thambadu says, I watched a live performance of Brother M, a musician from the DRC, last night on YouTube. Many other examples of that. So I end with this question. We started with you in Dubai. And now I want to know, what is it like on the family farm? What's happened to avocado exports? What's happened? I think it's
Wow.
strawberries and avocados, right?
No, let me
No.
tell you, my mom was telling me
Yes.
last night the avocado
Yes.
prices dropped to 2 rand a kilo or something like that.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Ridiculously low. Yeah, terrible happening. Look, I mean, everybody's been affected. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that's being unscathed, unless you're in a pharmaceutical business or a grocery business or a sort of a services that's required. Everybody's in trouble. So how is it at the farm? We have tried to make sure that all the employees here are looked after with food bags and with some money to keep them going. We've stopped all the cottages. We're not doing any harvesting. Everything's kind of come to a shutdown, and we've held up and kept 2 staff members here with their families. Other than that, I myself am working continuously and also being cooked for with my mom as cooking. So I'm really quite happy. But ultimately, the prices of avocados have dropped and raspberries have dropped. So yes, we are dealing with that and the repercussions of that. I have no idea what's going to be happening with those.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Johnson. I thank you, APSA, for sponsoring our webinar, and we look forward to having you back next Friday in discussion with Iraj Abidian and Ray Mashlaka, my colleague. Really appreciate your time. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you very much to all our insiders.